Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode. My name is Will Bolsover and today we have the privilege of delving into the captivating world of visual storytelling with an extraordinary artist. Our guest is not only a National Geographic photographer, but also an Emmy-nominated director, weaving tales through his lens that transport us to the heart of nature's grandeur. From the rugged terrains of Colorado to the dramatic storms that sweep across open plains, he has witnessed it all. Join us as we uncover the journey behind the lens of the incredibly talented Keith Ladzinski. His experiences, ranging from the adrenaline of storm chasing to the tranquil moments in wildlife photography, promise a visual journey filled with stories, insights, and the unique artistry of one of the finest photographers in the business. So grab your favourite beverage, settle in, and let's welcome Keith. Cool. Well, Keith, thanks. It's great to finally meet you. I think it's been, as I said to Andy last night, I had a chat with Andy, and I think it was about 4 years ago that I first sort of tried to hit you guys up and see if you could do some stuff with us. But maybe you can just sort of set the scene for where we are now, because I've never been here before, and it's a pretty cool studio by the looks of it.
Yeah, well, it's great to meet you as well, too, finally, after all those years.
Yeah.
Thanks for that incredible Svalbard trip. You set this on. That was a lot of fun. We had a good time.
Yeah, Andy was talking about that accidental polar bear image he got yesterday.
Unreal. I was 5 minutes late for that. We can actually talk about it if you feel like it, but I'll set the stage real quick. But, here we are sitting in my studio in Boulder, Colorado. Nice cold winter day, and I'm glad you were able to swing in today.
Yeah. But so you say it's cold here in terms of, I read the other day though, you're half Scottish. Explain that. Where does that come from?
So my mom, on my dad's side is Polish, and my mom's side is Scottish. And my mom immigrated over from Glasgow when she was quite young, 3 years old. She's the youngest of four, and they made the decision to leave Glasgow in the mid 1955, and came over to Bayonne, New Jersey, where they essentially settled, and that's where she grew up.
And so how long have you been here for now in Boulder?
I've been in Colorado for most of my life. They moved my brother and I to Colorado when I was 2 years old, and they blindly moved us to Colorado. They'd never stepped foot here. Just my parents. My brother was just about to enter kindergarten, and they didn't want to give him the same public school experience that they had.
Yeah.
So we had an uncle that lived here in Colorado that was in the Air Force, and it was my mom's brother, and he convinced them to just, without ever having visited, move to Colorado. So Colorado is what I've known pretty much for my entire life. I grew up about 90 miles south of here in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Boulder in 2012. And so, and then of course, I've traveled out of Colorado, and I've lived in different parts of the world, but for 3 months at a time or 6 months at a time.
I've never even been here before, but I was quite surprised, apart from the difference in temperature between here and San Francisco. It was like 21 Celsius in San Francisco. I got in here, it was minus 14. I was like, Jesus Christ. But in terms of, so I've never been here, but it seems a pretty laid back sort of area of the States, and very outdoorsy and stuff. There's a lot of Olympics set up here as well, isn't there, and stuff. But is that sort of what set the scene for you, sort of growing up in this environment, in terms of, it's quite a big difference to sort of living in an inner city or something like that, isn't it?
It is. What I love about Boulder is that it's a real melting pot for athletes. It's also a real melting pot for artists as well. You have a lot of independent filmmakers that live here. You have a lot of writers. You've got really brilliant minds that work in, high-level engineering fields or work for NOAA or NCAR. And then as far as the athletes are concerned here, you have some of the best and the best, that gravitate to this part of the country because of the access to the mountains.
Yeah.
And then just 90 miles from here where I grew up is where the Olympic Training Center is.
Oh, right.
And it's because you have altitude here in Colorado Springs. It's about 7,000 feet altitude, which, forgive me because I know it's meters.
Yeah, that's right.
So, it's like over 2,000 meters.
Yeah.
And so it's great for them as far as, for anything cardio, it gives you an edge when you're working at higher altitude. And so the whole front range of Colorado is quite unique, that a lot of athletes move to this region simply for training or because the terrain is so great.
Sort of explains your Winter Olympics sort of success and the sort of Brits' absolute nightmare at the Winter Olympics, doesn't it? We've got Aviemore in Scotland, and that's about it. Not exactly the best training ground.
I'm not here to rub it in.
I'm sure you will.
And I'm Scottish at heart, so come on.
Exactly. But so is that how you sort of got into what you do now? Sort of talk me through that in terms of your photography is your style is quite different to traditional photography methods, etc. And you seem to sort of set the trend on that, taking a different approach. because you had this outdoor lifestyle and background. How did that happen? Where did it sort of start for you? You're a bit of a skateboarder, weren't you, at one stage?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Thanks for the nice words. For me, when I picked up a camera, like most people, you sort of gravitate to what you know. And what I knew at the time in my life when I picked up a camera was I was an avid skateboarder, like fanatical about it. But I also grew up, growing up in Colorado, the outdoors is just all around you. So I was dividing my time between skateboarding and being outside, like rock climbing and mountain biking and camping and doing all the things you would do in the mountains. But then I also had this sort of urban duality. And one of the great things about Colorado is it does have a really great skateboarding scene. So that being a piece of my life as well as the outdoors, I started pointing my camera at skateboarding, which is really all about artificial light, using strobes. You're likely trespassing and you're running from security guards and things like that really quick.
Yeah.
Sort of renegade run and gun setups. And
sort of skateboard lifestyle, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're probably shooting at night or in bad light, so you're having to use strobes to sort of supplement the bad light you're working with. That was completely polarized by going into the mountains where it's quiet and serene and you're waiting for the light in the moment to evolve. At sunrise or sunset, you're out there alone. You aren't running from people.
Yeah. Just from bears.
Exactly. You're just kind of watching your back. Yeah. Keep an eye on your six. But the whole thing is, for me, it was, and I didn't realize it until the years had sort of lapsed a bit, that my style became a bit amalgamized in that once I started moving away from skateboarding and focusing on wildlife and rock climbing and the different sports I was shooting and the different activities and the natural history components, I sort of took a little bit of that skateboarding sensibility and was using off-camera lighting. And a lot of that was because I really liked the look. Yeah. And that look became sort of incidentally a signature look. It was really just more of a taste thing initially. And then over time, it sort of evolved into its own thing. And I became a bit influential to other photographers. And it wasn't that I had pioneered anything. I had just simply taken this sensibility that I had and put it into sports that weren't really being shot that way at that time.
But it's a much bigger thing now, and some people and I've obviously sort of followed you and worked with you a bit just on the NWS stuff, but where sort of Andy, good friend of yours, we were chatting last night, it's sort of quite clear that he's put almost the intelligence back into sort of ocean conservation and photography and stuff like that. He's got a great angle on it and stuff. But then some people have said you've put sexy back into climbing and photography. Is that fair?
I mean, I would be breaking the guidelines of humility if I would agree with that or even say that. But
I know, and I'm sort of taking the piss a bit. But in terms of you seem to have made it look a lot more attractive and fun, exciting, and adrenaline. And at a time when climbing has come through massively, hasn't it? In terms of the last sort of 5-10 years. Whether you look at Meru or Free Solo or the Alpinist has just been out and stuff like that, hasn't it? And you've sort of been one of the trendsetters, I would have said, almost on that, to sort of bring that into the sort of public domain a bit more.
Perhaps early on, climbing industry has exploded over, and those films you've referenced have certainly been a really big part of that, as well as climbing gyms being, it's almost like you can't go to a gym anymore without there being at least a small climbing wall. It's become so accessible to people everywhere, and a lot of that is through climbing gyms, and then of course these movies being influential. For me personally, the photography that I was doing, I think during my heyday of shooting climbing was certainly during that rise. Yeah. But it's funny because, and it's a bit ironic, is that as climbing became extremely popular, I was sort of pivoting and exploring different facets of photography and really getting more into climate change work and natural history work and different advertising opportunities. And as much as I still love climbing, and I probably do, 20-25% of my years maybe dedicated to rock climbing now, as things were becoming really red hot in the climbing industry, I start sort of making this pivot without realizing it. So
because you have evolved, haven't you? You did the skateboarding, you've done the climbing, you do some commercial work. We all need to make money as well. And you've done a lot of the natural world stuff as well. Was that sort of intentional evolution for you, or was it just sort of as things came up, or what was the motivation behind that?
It's a little of both. A lot of it was the product of just simply getting opportunities handed to me. Yeah. And then also chasing interests. So the wildlife thing, it's tough to make a living as a wildlife photographer, right? Everybody wants to do it. It's obviously fun. It's beautiful. It's exciting. You go to exotic places. So that's a very difficult place to kind of crack into. At least that was my experience. I was really fortunate in that rock climbing had opened up a much larger global landscape for me. And so I'd be on these climbing expeditions, and oftentimes, when the athletes were on rest days, or even if you were just simply on location, moments would present themselves, and I started becoming more opportunistic with those. And when everybody else was resting, and climbers are as pedantic as any athlete in the sense that they're like always monitoring their skin and their energy levels, and they're
constantly, their nails.
Yeah, totally, and just the quality of their skin, the tactileness of it and the durableness of it. And if they get a small cut on their finger, it can end a trip. But they're always really just taking care of themselves. So when it came to rest days, most climbers are very good about simply taking that rest day as what it should be. Whereas me, I'm like, I want to go see some other stuff. I want to get out of here. I want to go see what this region that I'm in is all about. Maybe extend a trip a little bit. Wildlife started becoming a big extension of that because growing up here in Colorado, you see a fair amount of North American wildlife, and it was something that I'd shoot recreationally, but I started shooting it with much more fervent passion as, the years evolved, and a lot of that was really just being lucky and being sent on a climbing trip to Greenland or Antarctica or South Africa or some really cool place where there is an abundance of wildlife or it's unique. That gave me an itch really early on, and I just started honing in on that more and more, and I started getting organic opportunities.
Yeah.
And then also once I started getting a taste of those, really just trying to design shoots where they became a more important component.
They're integrated in. And you touched on it then, but Andy said again last night, we chatted about you a bit, and he said that you're one of the hardest working photographers that he knows. In terms of, and is that because you don't want to sit down and rest, in terms of, you just alluded to it then, in terms of, okay, you're doing a climbing project, but then that stage of that, day or whatever is sort of on pause, right, I'm going to go off and see if I can find this or do that. Is that, and I've heard stories about you sort of driving the roads around here, you're up and you're out and you're always looking for something different. Is that what motivates you to do that? Because it's difficult to keep challenging yourself, isn't it? And maybe it sort of helps with, as photographic equipment evolves so quickly and stuff like that, there are new challenges and stuff like that, but to have the mindset to be able to do that in what can be quite a saturated industry, it's pretty impressive.
Well, first, you touched on a lot of great points and reasons right there. And I can't not address, that was nice of Andy to say that.
Yeah.
It's funny because, as you work in this industry and you begin to meet more and more these really hyper creative people. And, I was lucky just to have a really great relationship with him for, going on 16 years, and we got to do a lot of great things together. And that's nice of him to say that. And I could say the same about photographers that I know, right? For me, I think the real conduit here and the real attraction is it's just curiosity. It's not wanting to sit still. It's having an excessive amount of energy, perhaps, where I don't really know how to relax. And also when you're out behind a camera, especially when it's wildlife or really any sport, I can get interested in just about anything I'm photographing. It could be like that canister of mints right there. Like I could get really into it and put the right lens on and start playing with the light. It just becomes fun.
Is he always like this?
Yeah. And exploratory, it's really an opportunity when you're behind a camera to really look at the world more objectively and start honing in on things. And when you're shooting wildlife, specifically, there's rarely second opportunities. You can't direct your subject. So, and also the moments can often be fleeting. And I think when you take those three things, they give you stakes. And when there's stakes involved with something, it's almost like if you're photographing an athlete and they're like, you have one chance. All of a sudden, that heightens the importance of nailing the shot immensely. And with wildlife, I feel like that is the stakes all the time, every time. Unless it's like some sleeping lion or something. There's certain animals.
Yeah.
But if it's like a bird that's coming in, or there's a
quick
again. Squabble, it's always back to birds.
Yeah.
If you see two animals and they're having like a real behavioral moment, maybe they're sparring or fighting, or it could be whatever it is. Those moments are quick. They don't want to be around humans. So you're already kind of being intrusive, so you have to be kind of stealth and figure out a way to allow yourself to get that access. And then when the moment presents itself, you have to be on point. And I love that. Anytime there's stakes involved, so working for companies like Red Bull, for instance, is usually really fun because something really crazy and radical is going to happen, and it's going to probably happen once. And that really heightens the opportunity there. It heightens your senses immensely because you know you can't fuck it up.
But that's
Can
but
I
that
curse
sounds,
on this
yeah,
show,
of course
by
you
the
can.
way?
Yeah. But that sounds that you thrive on it, which is quite different to a lot of people who sort of back off in those situations, and it's more of a stress point for them, whereas you seem to sort of embrace it. So is there, and you say it's about that one shot and that one opportunity. I sound like Eminem now. Is there one shot that sticks out for you? Andy last night said that polar bear image on Svalbard. Obviously, that was what he said was just like probably one of his preferred wildlife shots that he's done. And there was a bit of luck and a lot of skill involved in it. And but is there one for you that is like shit? Yeah, that was just one that always sticks out.
Yeah, from the wildlife perspective, gosh, I'd have to look. The problem with me is I'm like a voracious photographer in the sense that I shoot a lot.
Yeah.
There's an abundance, so my archive's kind of spiraled completely out of control. So to just think of a single shot on the fly here.
That's right. That's cool.
Yeah, but it's tough because I know that those moments exist.
Yeah.
Typically speaking, those are moments of either deep serendipity or hardcore planning.
Yeah.
And those are typically when those big unique moments present themselves. But I have a million great stories of going out and really having to battle for it. Like one moment that comes to mind, and this just randomly comes to mind, was in 2016. I was working on a story around a lot of the national parks in the United States, and I went to the Everglades, and Andy came with me. And Andy came out to assist me, and I say that very lightly and loosely because, Andy's such a skilled and expert photographer. He just came along to sort of simply be there and like shoot alongside of me and have some, some bro time together and just get some good shots. But Andy's skill as an underwater photographer is something that I've really been able to learn a lot from over the years. And while we were in the Everglades, which, is a big wetland national park, so many of the opportunities for great shots do live underwater. And so I remember going out there, I had this really cheap like surf housing, something, like a polymer housing that you would take out into breakers that, isn't too heavy, you get thrashed around in and not like kill yourself with. Whereas Andy had a nice Nauticam housing, which is a completely different pedigree of equipment. And we were like there night number one, there's these beautiful lilies in the water, and I'm using my like pretty shitty housing. And Andy, he's like, here, dude, use this. And he gives me the Nauticam. I'm like, wow. Right away, I'm like, this is a very nice piece of equipment. You just feel the difference right away. Quality is night and day. Shooting photos with it. And I'm like, wow, thanks, man. And I go to hand it back to him. And God bless his heart, he's like, dude, I brought that for you. He's like, make photos. And he's showing me like different techniques from doing, I had a little bit of underwater experience at that point, but not much. And most of it was around using my surf housing, which was really clunky and quite new to me. And I live in Colorado, I'm landlocked. It's only when I'm in a location where I could use it that I can get to use it. So we shoot all day. We're getting all these great photos. That evening, we're sitting back at the hotel, and I was like, I'm buying one of these. And being in Florida, there's lots of underwater dive shops. So he took me to a place where he had actually bought his. I spent $10,000, buy the whole setup, this heavy price tag, just, one of those, what do they call it? Buyer's remorse. Immediately, I'm like, there's $2,000. So I get this piece of equipment, but now all of a sudden you're like leveled up. And 2 days into this thing, we're sitting there and, photographing alligators, doing all these things. The story was for National Geographic, so the stakes are quite high. It's nearly impossible to show up to an editor's desk with photos and blow their mind, right? They've seen everything. It's National Geographic. They're expecting the best. And so one of the things we did was Andy had a friend down there that dives with alligators in the Everglades. So he'll just get in there and he'll go snorkeling alone. And I mean, this is a place that's outrageously abundant with alligators. And he called up Chris. A couple days in, Chris meets us out to this one wetland area that's outside of the national park where we could actually go and do this. And we spent the day snorkeling through the Everglades with alligators. And you touch anything and there's just instant backscatter and everything has got moss and grit and not moss, just algae. And, if you touch the vegetation, all of a sudden it's like a fog bank in front of you. You can't see anything around you, which these predators love.
As you said, it sounds like Jurassic Park. Or
Totally.
Yeah.
And we are seeing alligators in heavy abundance the whole day, underwater, no less, like in their playground. And there was a moment that unfolded towards the very, end of the day where the sun was in just the right spot where it was sending these dancing rays of light underwater. And there was this alligator that had sort of like went down into the water and was underneath this beautiful piece of wood that kind of folded over. And I just remember it being a very standout moment in the entire project for me, because it was just one of those moments where everything was perfect. We'd worked really hard to get this shot because we'd spotted this alligator and moved in real slow. Some of them are really like coming close. I'm totally cool with that. I'm talking like 10 inches close.
Really, yeah.
Whereas some are just, alligators aren't as aggressive as crocodiles. Because a crocodile is a much, much more dangerous giant reptile.
Yeah, alligators are fine, aren't they?
They're fine. You can slap them around. Yeah. Thankfully, they're not as, they're not like
plastic,
provoked, like, or an alligator is more, anything in the wildlife world, predators, if you approach a predator eye to eye, that is definitely, that's a sign of, usually if predators, when you watch them hunt, they peripheral hunt a lot. As soon as they see the prey that they're after is like locking eyes with them, they get all casual. They're like, hey, they just sort of. It's funny when you watch those behaviors because they're ambush predators, right? No one wants to die at the mouth of something else, so they have to be really cunning. Well, if you approach a predator, certainly like an alligator, eye to eye, straight in, they feel like they have the lesser hand in a situation like that. They're not going to just attack unless they're cornered or it's the.
So you're saying it's
a
safe.
Female in estrus. It's not safe, but it's definitely.
They know what's coming.
I learned a lot during that dive, and I've done a few since. But it's. I do remember just getting in. I don't even know why I got on that tangent because I forgot my greater point. But I do remember getting in, and we worked with this one alligator for like 15 minutes under this beautiful compositional setting.
Yeah.
And the photo I got was a very standout wildlife moment, and certainly one of my best underwater wildlife frames at the time, and one that I'm still like quite pleased that I was able to get.
Yeah.
But that was a standout moment for sure.
And it does, and the way you described it, it's obvious that in terms of it shows your passion around the topics as well. But you do a lot on your own doorstep as well, don't you? In terms of a lot of people travel far and wide these days in terms of photographers, right? For, I've got to go to the other side of the world to take images and stuff like that so that it's different. But you invest a lot of time on your doorstep, is that fair to say?
It is fair to say. A lot of it, I think there's a two-pronged reason. One is I just want to go out and shoot photos because it's good for my brain. It's a place where I can find tunnel vision and quiet. I just like to shoot. I just like the act of shooting, even if they're bad pictures or they're mediocre pictures. It's just fun to go out and hunt.
It's a sort of therapy.
Find things. It really is. Yeah. It's where I'm kind of, it's one of the places where I can find myself at my happiest. But the other thing too is if I'm driving around and photographing wildlife locally, where I live, there is certainly a fair amount of things to go photograph in the wildlife world, but it's not hyper abundant. It's not like you're in the Masai Mara or something. You still do have to go find it. And there are little indicators and you slowly find and unearth your little spots. But what I do it for as much as trying to get good shots is it's a great place to practice. And over the years, I have realized it's one thing if you're photographing anything you shoot recursively, you're just naturally going to get better at. With wildlife, because the moments are fleeting and you're really having to make sure the photos are sharp, you're dealing with 600 millimeter lenses, there's a lot of room for error. I think it's really good to it's almost like a training exercise. Almost like an athlete's going to go out and train all the time.
Yeah.
I think when you're working with big lenses and even just anything in general, you really want to get the greater understanding you have with your equipment and the better you are with it and the better and more refined your timing is. Because a good photo is just, it's the merge point of a great moment happening and then good, well-executed timing.
Yeah.
And so if you nurture those things and you practice a lot, your pictures are just going to get better. So A, I really like it, but B, it is a very practical thing that when I am out in somewhere like the Pontanal or in Svalbard or somewhere where there is moments happening that can be fleeting, it's handy to really have a full comprehension and
be on it straight away.
Yeah, and also you can get out of shape creatively.
Yeah,
that's the one thing I've noticed. If my work kind of pivots and I find myself filming more than I'm shooting photos or vice versa, there is an adjustment period when I get back into whatever that next job is.
So it's training your eye as well, you're sort of saying.
It really is, and also like it's different styles of storytelling, and so the more I do both of those things, or whatever, if I have a big job coming up, the more I'm in tune with what that job is, the better I can execute.
So you work on your doorstep a lot, but you travel a lot. How do you balance that? You've got a young family, it's difficult, isn't it?
It's very hard. I'm a newer dad, and that's definitely changed my life for the better. But it does. There's a lot of compromises when, I want to be an engaged dad. I don't want to be that dad that when my son's 16, he's just like, Dad liked his cameras, Dad was never around. Like, that is not what I'm.
Yeah.
So, but one of the great things is now when I go out and shoot, I take my son with me.
Dude.
And it's so much fun. And it's great because I get to he's at the age where everything is new and I get to see the world through his eyes. As cliche as that sounds, I know you're a dad, you get that. You can take something you've seen your entire life and make it exciting again when you're witnessing this thing you love more than anything, experience it for the first time and respond. And, I put bird feeders all around our yards, and we get, the squirrels come and steal the food, the birds show up. And I've noticed because I
Did you do that did you do that sort of before you had kids?
No, after.
I'm exactly the same. And suddenly I got much more into that. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? And suddenly you sort of ended up getting, I've got bird books and everything, Keith. And
I love that, man. And that's the other thing too. We'll put on Planet Earth, or I'll bring a photo book out, or even an illustrated book of wildlife, and then I'll take him in the field, and you can see that he's really enjoying it and responding to it. And when we fly or we drive around now, let's say like a flock of geese flies overhead, he'll see it out the window. It's like his periphery's getting tuned in too. Yeah. Because he'll see the birds and he'll like gesture and make a wild noise, and he does this thing where he like pretends to fly, and that's like his signal of like, I'm seeing a bird or whatever. Or if he sees a horse, he tries to make a horse's noise or whatever. Yeah. And so driving around with him, it's sort of a nice two-pronged effect for me. It's certainly much less about the photography when I've got my son Gray in the car with me. Yeah. I want him to see things. Of course, I'm going to hopefully get something, but I'm not going to burrow in So
you haven't taken him storm chasing yet?
Not yet. This year.
Yeah?
He's ready for tornadoes. Giant hail.
So what the hell is all that about? I mean, storm chasing, I'm just like, you're nuts. What?
That one, I'm really fortunate. I have a friend, Crystal Wright. I don't know if you know who Crystal Wright is, but she's an incredible photographer out of Australia. In 2018, she had she was doing a series of videos profiling different photographers, and she was profiling a kind of a mentor of hers, this guy Nick Moyer, who's a Sydney. He's like the Sydney Herald director of photography. He's an incredibly talented photographer, a very larger than life personality. This guy's hilarious. Australians in general are just fun. Yeah. And so Crystal contacted me and another friend, Skip, who lives here in North America, Skip Armstrong, and she said, "Hey, I'm doing this film on Nick. Do you guys want to come storm chase?" I've always loved bad weather in the sense that you're guaranteed a very interesting backdrop, right? I've always loved to chase lightning if there's a lightning storm in the area or if there's some kind of a weather event, but I'd never pursued storms like this in my life. Typically they were upon me and I was sort of there, stuck in them, or right place, right time, or whatever, however you want to frame it.
Wrong place, wrong time.
Or wrong place, wrong time in a lot of cases, actually. Yeah, which is absolutely the truth. Well, in this regard, I didn't know the level of science and understanding and amateur meteorology and all of those things that are involved to go. It's one thing to see a supercell, like a giant storm formation, and just drive your car towards it. Anybody can do that. But there's a strategy behind the storms you do chase and the side of the storm you find yourself on, because most of the storm is like a mess. But if you can get on the right side where there's great, wind and it's shaped and it's sculpted and you're not sitting there in the hail, those are places where you can make great photos and exquisite photos.
So there are little sort of almost, not vacuums, that's probably the wrong word, but in terms of little pockets where you can sit in to monitor.
It's not exclusive to the storm that it's going to be beautiful. There is a position you need to find yourself in. And it's also quite hard to get into position too, because a lot of these storms, they can be moving at 50 to 60 miles, even much faster actually, where they're moving across the landscape. They're really all spinning across the landscape. from convection and the way they form and everything. And you have to understand, you look at a radar. Nick has all these incredible radar apps that I've slowly been able to kind of learn over the years. He's been doing this for 20 years, so he's like the expedition leader. And we lean on him. It's almost like being out with a biologist that really understands a frog you're trying to photograph. They're going to know the habitat. They're going to know the behaviors. They're going to increase your chances of success, 90%. With Nick and storm chasing, I just got to draft behind him and find and just get brought to these incredible places and slowly do my best to learn about them. But the storm chasing thing is so addicting because the days are interesting. You wake up in the morning, typically early, but the storms don't happen until 2-3 in the afternoon. The reason you get up early is you got to start looking at the radar systems immediately, because you open up a radar and you look at essentially Tornado Alley, which is multiple states, like a gigantic swath of the United States, and Nick will start making calculations and decisions on which storms we should be pursuing. And it is not uncommon to wake up in the morning and be like, we have to drive 600 miles today.
Really?
And you'll just get in the car. And the great thing about the US is that there's great highway systems. And that's why it's a great place to storm chase. And we're also fortunate in that some of the most incredible weather events in the world do happen here, specifically around tornadoes and supercell formations, which is all based on the geography of the mountains and the ocean, the surrounding oceans and the Gulf and everything else. But that intersection of things, knowing where to go and to start planning your day early, you'll spend, I think the first time I chased, we did 15 days and we drove just shy of 8,000 miles in 15 days.
Okay.
That gives you any perspective. It's a lot of time in the car, swapping stories and broing down and exhausting all your audiobooks and podcasts.
Listening
and
to the
playlists.
Spice Girls.
Exactly. But you need to be with people you like.
Yeah.
Because you are in the car a lot.
And trust, I imagine, as well, being in those situations.
Trust is everything in situations like that.
And did that, you've worked on a lot of, just moving on to sort of the natural world and conservation, you've done a fair amount of projects on that. Did you get a different angle on all of that from the storm chasing in terms of the climate change aspects and everything like that? Did that, give you a different sort of perspective on things?
There were some little lessons learned from storm chasing that helped for the climate stuff. But for the most part, the storms in themselves they're growing in intensity with the way that the climate and planet is changing, right? So you're having longer elongated hurricane seasons, and storm chasing season is becoming elongated and more erratic and infrequent. What was it, in February, there were tornadoes in the southeast of the United States that killed a bunch of people and wreaked horrible destruction. Really unseasonable tornadoes. The weather's changing a lot, and you could really direct that to climate change. For the climate change work that I've done specifically, there are two things, certainly around algae blooms. It's hotter longer, that the heat index is kind of changing a little bit. So, algae blooms are ignited by heat. So
you did some amazing imagery on that.
Thanks, man.
Really.
That I could tell you stories, but that day in particular, I was so excited to go photograph the big algae blooms of Lake Erie because they're oddly not that well known, but it's a huge problem. And the day we went out, we're working with this university in the area that does all this algae bloom studying. The day we go out, my assistant, who was one of the hardest working people, she actually just moved on about a few weeks ago, so I'm speaking about her in the past tense because of that reason. Her name was Angie.
Just clarify.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm speaking.
She wasn't storm chasing.
She didn't die. No. But we went out, and Angie had... she's just an on top of it person in every possible way. She had all my drone bats ready. We were going to shoot these photos. We needed the boat as sort of scale reference, right? They're going to take us out to the blooms. And I'm like, perfect, I'll just use the boat. So there's not a lot of boat traffic out in these areas because the water's just sludgy and nasty and there's no reason to be. And so when we got out there, she forgot to charge the remote control for the drone. And she didn't know you even had to charge that because this was the first time she'd worked around a drone before. So the bats were all good. We had 8 batteries for this drone, but we had 19% on the controller. So I basically got 2 flights. And we were out in like the most unbelievable setting.
So that goes back to you saying you've got to be on it when those moments present themselves. But you got what you needed though.
I did, luckily, but I'm a greedy photographer and a greedy filmer. Like, I want the most I can get, and also, you know, the more you put into something, you can really whittle down and start working a situation and finding better photos, right? But those pictures in general, I'm really happy with. But I had a complete, you know how it is you're a photographer, you go out a lot of times with the preconceived vision of what you're hoping to get, and then you work with what you have and you try to execute on that vision, or oftentimes you're blown away and you get more than you hoped for, and then there's other times where you get skunked or whatever. But in this situation, I had all these photographs in mind that I could not wait to go get, and we got some of them, but
so anyway, is that why the assistant's not here anymore?
No, she's so talented. We started making the decision back in July that she needed to start pursuing her own photography. She's so talented. Yeah.
But on the climate change and conservation aspect, is there anything you travel to? Whilst you do a lot on your doorstep, you travel to, you know, the remote corners of the world. Actually, I just remembered the footage, because our sister ship that we have in Svalbard now, it's the sister ship of the one you came back from Antarctica in.
Oh, nice, the Freya.
Yeah, no, the other one, not the Freya. So the one we use now is Kinfish, but it's the sister ship of the one that you came back from Antarctica, and some of the footage there, bouncing back through the ocean, would look pretty brutal.
That was intense. That was on the Drake.
That's it.
Yeah, the Drake. Passage, the Southern Ocean, or the Southern Passage, or the Drake Passage, whatever you want to call it.
But on a boat that size, that's pretty brutal. But
that was insane. I did not film that. That was Andy filmed a lot of the interiors. This guy Shane Moore filmed some.
Yeah.
And then I cannot believe I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, I didn't do any of that.
Yeah, but it's just...
I was also the still photographer on that shoot.
But going back to sort of far corners of the world, are there examples in terms of, or is there stuff that you've seen that you're like, this is the biggest example that I've seen, not everywhere, but of where climate change is having a massive impact, you know, or conservation issues that you see that are common in different areas?
Absolutely, and you start to see that. You start to see it more when you begin to work with people that are top experts in their field, right? And that's one of the things I've been very fortunate in my life, certainly over the last previous 12 years, is that going out on assignments and being with, you know, one of the leading ecologists. They're going to show you indicators and signs and catastrophic areas and healthy areas. They're really going to build. They're going to give you a better understanding of those things. And then as you travel around, you begin to see them more. And the same as when you're working with a top biologist or ornithologist or whatever it is. I think that I owe everything in my career. I mean, I'll work as hard as I can and I'll do everything I can to kind of get the best shots that I can. But I owe so much to the athletes and then these people that work in these scientific fields that really, I get to sort of stand on their shoulders and call myself tall, so to speak, in that I get to go out and really work off of their knowledge base and go do my job. And that's what's great about this. Photography can be looked at a lot as this sort of single occupation where you're the person with the camera and you're doing all the storytelling. But the truth is you're really reliant on your fixers and the different people that help you facilitate these shoots in the field. And if you get a great editor that's like, here's 5 incredible contacts, which and you start running down these little rabbit trails investigatively and everything else. It's such a team activity. Filmmaking is like amplified even tremendously more than that because of all the moving parts. But even as a working photographer, I can't shoot a great climbing picture without like a talented climber. You need these different people, and these relationships become so symbiotic is the wrong word because there's more friendly than a symbiosis, but or symbiotic relationship.
That's working in tandem with those profiles and those personalities
it's a better
to really bring it to life. Yeah,
absolutely.
And then COVID. So it's about 2 years ago now, isn't it? Obviously, a massive impact globally, and when that happened, I was quite hopeful that things would change, and obviously I run a travel company. We try and do things differently, but very conscious of the impact that travel has on climate and everything like that. In the UK, you sort of looked up and, worldwide, and there were no jet trails in the sky. You had sort of deer in the street in the cities and stuff, and you're like, oh shit, maybe this is going to be, the moment that stuff changes. I've been a bit sort of, sad that it doesn't seem to have changed much, and we're as guilty as the next company. The machines are cranking back up again pretty quickly, aren't they? What do you think about that? How's COVID been? Are there any sort of solutions to this?
Well, I mean, from an environmental standpoint, one of the worst things from COVID is that microplastic consumption and usage has been amplified. I don't know the actual numbers, so I don't be like tenfold. It's not. I don't know
in
what
terms of masks and PPE and
absolutely, and everything is. You travel anywhere now, and like we were at a hotel. We just got back from a trip, and down in the hotel breakfast buffet, every apple was wrapped in cellophane and plastic. Right, everybody is now such a hypochondriac.
Don't they grow on trees like that?
They do, absolutely. But they just failed to. Usually, they unwrap them, but not anymore.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's all these things where, I mean, the petroleum industry benefited tremendously from COVID. Like, granted, yes, there was probably less air travel and other things. So maybe I shouldn't say they benefited tremendously. I will say that plastic consumption went up immensely, and that's a massive problem. That's something we've been doing a lot of microplastics work the last couple of years, and so getting a greater understanding of that issue, and then as you travel and seeing it becoming even more prevalent, and I feel like people were trying to at least reverberate a message of like, hey, everybody, let's avoid this stuff. It became an unavoidable thing because it was under the guise of sanitation and health and safety, and that. So as far as COVID's concerned from an environmental perspective, I feel like that is a major, step backwards in where we've kind of come there. But there are some of the positives are something like you addressed, like you were seeing less planes in the air for a while. And so, there's less gas being used and all the pollution that's created there. And even just the ambience, the sound ambience. I remember here in Boulder for the first, let's say it was 6 months for sake of conversation, people were just indoors, right? And all of a sudden there were pictures of people. There's a street here in town called Pearl Street. It runs kind of right downtown, and it's like a shopping district. It's all cobblestone, mostly
Andy
walking.
told me about it, yeah.
And so, down on Pearl, there were like sightings of mountain lions just walking down Pearl because the streets were empty. It was almost like I Am Legend, and that the wildlife was like starting to be like, all the humans are gone, thank God.
Yeah.
We're slowly.
But that's incredible, isn't it? And that was sort of so reassuring in how quickly it seemed to sort of bounce back, in terms of the wildlife sort of coming back into the cities and stuff like that. But then how quickly it reverts again is a bit depressing, isn't it?
It is. It was extraordinary for a moment, and then now it's. I think we're just the planet's trying to go back to life as normal, and it is wild when you see. I mean, we all live in a much more comfortably than humans have ever lived historically speaking. But in that, sorry, my friend just waved in. The problem is we're so codependent on massive supply chains, and to live the way we live requires a lot. And it's interesting as you start seeing those things being pulled apart. Like right now, there's this whole the latest conversation is how the oil industry's oil's going to price of gas and everything, and petroleum is going to go up because of the percentage of gas that Russia provides to the planet, right? And I forget what it is. It's like 6% or something, but 6% is a lot. And so it doesn't take much to disrupt humanity. And I think we're all trying to kind of get back into our old rhythm, but our rhythm sucks.
Yeah.
Our rhythm is so hard on the natural world. And we are part of that natural world as much as we live in houses and live in sanitary places and put paint on our walls like this room we're sitting in here, and we like things at a specific temperature, and all those comforts that humanity has sort of evolved into wanting, they come at a huge cost. And I don't know, man. That's like a podcast in itself. We can talk about that forever.
So then just one last question. And I appreciate your time. What really do you hope to achieve through your imagery, and what would you want your sort of legacy to be?
It's a good question. I actually ask myself that a lot. As particularly around the legacy talking point, I have no idea what that looks like and what that means.
You start to think about it a bit more when you've got kids, don't you?
Kind of. I think I look more at the longevity of it, like how can I keep this going because I love it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That to me is more important than a legacy. You hope that your pictures make a difference and that they perhaps like start a conversation or people are moved by them. I think that's the highest praise you can ever get through a single photo, is that you've perhaps changed the narrative that somebody has. But when I look at the topic of legacy, like we're working on a documentary right now about Tim Lehman, and Tim is like a legacy photographer. His work on Birds of Paradise is truly legacy. It's legacy to the point where his images are in the Natural History Museum, like of New York. Like they are prominent, they are globally seen. To me, that's what I think of when I think of what legacy is. Or I look at Paul Nicklin's Arctic photography, right?
Yeah.
Paul shoots a lot of other things, but his Arctic photography has become, and of course his greater underwater work as well.
The leopard seals and
Yeah, absolutely. People get these, Brian Scarry with his work on whales and things. People that dedicate themselves to a pretty specific topic, that's where legacy, I think, is birthed, right? David Dublay's underwater work, right? He focused so heavily on that thing.
So you're still looking for your topic.
Dude, I'm such
You're just doing a bit of everything.
shooter. It's like, give me everything. And so I don't know that I'll ever be one of those legacy photographers when you look at it in terms of that.
Well, you seem to be doing pretty well, mate.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. That's very nice of you, but I don't focus on a thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to say I get bored, but I love variety. It makes shooting more fun for me personally, and that's why I kind of bounce around a lot.
Fair play. So, basically, thanks, Keith. Really appreciate it. Where can people find you? What's your Instagram, your website? What's the...
Yeah, thanks for asking. My website is my last name. It's ladzinski.com, ladzinski.com, and my Instagram handle is also Ladzinski.
Cool. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks for having me.